Welcome to Chapter 10 Alpha, in which we learn the future tense in Greek. So the first one we're going to look at is the most common way of forming the future tense, which is with a sigma, so we call it the sigmatic future. So for most verbs, you're going to take the present stem and add a sigma, and then add the indicative endings that you already learned. So for our sample verb luo, that means taking the present stem lu, adding a sigma, and then adding o, ace, a, omen, eta, usin. So here's a chart of the full future indicative. So we've got my future stem loose, plus the endings that you know and love. And the translation of those would be luso, I will loosen, luces, you will loosen, luce, he, she, it will loosen, etc. Follow a similar pattern to get the infinitive. So we'll take the present stem, lu, plus a sigma, plus the infinitive ending ain to get loosein, which you can translate to be about to loosen. And then we'll follow the same pattern for the future active participles. So loose plus the participle endings, which are on, usa, on. So the first one is masculine nominative singular, the second one is feminine nominative singular, and the last one is neuter nominative singular. All of those would be translated being about to loosen. So those were how to form the future active, indicative, participles, and infinitive. If you want to form the middle voice, then you follow the same pattern. You can look at your book on page 184. So there are some minor variations to this pattern of forming the future by sticking a sigma on the end of your present tense stem. One of those minor variations applies to any present stem that ends in a labial. So remember the labials are beta, pi, and phi. When you add a sigma to any of those letters, you get psi. So for example, blepo, I see, becomes blep, so, and you simply change pi sigma to a psi, blepso, I will see. So pempo, I send, becomes pempso, I will send. Grapho, I write, becomes grapso, I will write. Another variation is if the stem ends in a velar. So the velars are gamma, kappa, and chi. When you add a sigma to any of those, you end up with xi. So lego becomes lexo, I say and I will say. Dioko, dioxomai. You'll notice that that particular future actually has the middle voice ending, and one of our later slides is going to be about deponent futures. Fulato becomes fulaxo, dechomai becomes dexomai. Last minor variation for this slide is the dental stems. If your stem ends in delta, theta, tau, or zeta, and you add a sigma to it, then the dental goes away and you're just left with a sigma. So we get speudo becomes speuso, patho becomes peso, pato becomes passo, paraskewazdo becomes paraskewasso. So those were all sigmatic features, although for some of them the sigma changed the stem a bit. Now let's look at some that form the future without using a sigma at all. So asigmatic, the A at the beginning means without. So particularly when the stem ends in isdo, then the future stem, if you follow our pattern, it should be ids-so, but we learned on the previous slide that the data will go away and you're left with iso. But then when you have the sigma between an iota and an omega specifically, the sigma drops out and we're left with eo. Then we have two vowels next to each other and they contract. So we get o. So this applies, for example, to the word comizdo, which is I bring. You would expect a future comiso, but again, that sigma drops out and a contraction happens, so the future is comio, I will bring. In the second singular, comizdes becomes comies, you will bring. Comizde, future comie, he, she, it will bring, etc., etc. So now let's look at the pattern for forming the future tense of epsilon and alpha contracts. So for epsilon contracts, you would expect phileo to become phileso, and that's almost what happens except for the epsilon before the sigma lengthens to an eta. So phileo becomes phileso, and that is the general pattern for most epsilon contracts. One notable exception is kaleo, which is exactly the same in the future tense, kaleo. So the present tense and the future tense forms of that particular verb are identical. You'll have to rely on context for translation. In alpha contracts, similar things happen. You would expect timao to become timaso, but instead that alpha before the sigma lengthens and you get timeso, and that is the general pattern for most alpha contract verbs. So the last slide I want to take you to, well, the last two slides are about deponent futures. So deponent means, the deponent future means that the Greek present tense has an active voice ending, but the future tense uses the Greek middle voice forms. Now in English, we'll translate both of them as active voice. So let's look at some examples, and I'm going to tell you fun little linguistic things that happen along the way. So akuo becomes akusomai. We've taken the present stem and added a sigma, but then we've used the middle voice endings. Badizdo, badiumai. It's an asigmatic future, but now the new stem is badi-e, and then when that sigma drops out, we contract epsilon and omicron to get u. Bino becomes besomai. You'll notice that the I, the alpha iota, has lengthened to an eta for no good reason. Blepo becomes blepsomai. Part of that you would expect. There's the labial stem pi plus a sigma becomes psa. But then in this particular verb, we use the middle voice endings for the future. I will see. Gignosko becomes gnosomai. That one looks very different, but as I've mentioned to you before, there's a couple things going on in gignosko that are actually not part of the real stem. So the gi at the beginning is a reduplication which designates the present tense, so that's not part of the real stem. Ska is another part that designates the present tense, so that's not part of the real stem. So that means the real present stem is just gno, and then you add your sigma, and then you add your middle voice endings, which means that gnosomai is actually a predictable result of the future stem of gignosko. Let's look at a few more, and specifically these ones have dramatic stem changes for the future tense. So horao, I see, but opsomai, completely different stem, I will see. So the stem for the future is op plus sigma, which then becomes psi. Treco, I run, future is dramumai. Again, just completely different stem, comes out of nowhere. It's drame plus sigma plus omai, but then the sigma goes away between the two vowels and you contract epsilon and omicron. Pasco, I suffer, becomes pesomai. Just like gignosko, that sch is a marker of the present tense. So the real present stem is just pa. But the future stem is still quite different. It starts out as penth, then you add your sigma, and your theta disappears, and then you get pence, which sort of morphs linguistically into pace. So your new future stem is pace, as opposed to the present stem pa. Pipto, I fall, becomes pesumai, I will fall. Just like gignosko, that first syllable is a reduplication, which marks the present tense, so that's not part of the real stem. The real present stem is just pt. The future stem, by contrast, is pese, and then you add your endings omai, and the epsilon omicron contracts. Last example is pino, I drink. Future is piomai. There's another way besides the reduplication and the sch to mark present tense, and one of those is called this nasal infix. So the new in pino is not part of the real present stem, it's just an extra addition to tell you that you're in present tense land. So the real present stem is just P, and then we make the future tense stem by adding sigma, but then we've got the sigma after the iota before the omicron, which we've learned in most instances goes away, and then you get P-O-my. In this particular one, no contractions happen. So I hope you enjoyed my little linguistic explanations of all of these funny words, and I will see you next time. Bye all!